What happens when you're given an unreasonable deadline as a developer or coder of some form? We're getting all into that based on my experience in this video. And thank you all for being patient with my crappy Las Vegas setup. I'm currently in Las Vegas for Black Hat and DEF CON, two big cybersecurity conferences that I'm so excited about. My name is Erica Dietrich. I have a Master of Software Engineering degree that I earned back in 2021. And I've had a lot of code-related jobs, actually not a lot of them being a full-on software developer. And all the software developer contracts that I've had, whether they were longer or shorter or whatever, have all been at startups. So keep that perspective in mind with this answer I'm about to give you. But really, in terms of unreasonable deadlines, it's not a matter of if it happens, what to do, it's a matter of when it happens. In my experience, unreasonable deadlines occur all the time, especially towards the end of proposed delivery dates, especially like in startup land, but I've heard this scenario in other places and in larger companies as well. You end up with these people above you that have a vision or promise something to certain stakeholders who maybe are less technical or not technical at all. And so they're promising things that they don't really understand what it takes to get done, whether that's resource-wise, knowledge-wise, people-wise, etc. And in a startup, this can be particularly intense because startups typically move very quickly. And again, you might not have anybody but like the founder or CEO who may or may not be technical above you that you're trying to convince of why something is or isn't possible in a certain time frame. I think that these unreasonable deadlines and the difficulty in explaining why something technically isn't reasonable or reasonable in a certain time frame to a non-technical person, in my opinion, that is the hardest part of being a developer or, again, coder, automator of some form. And that's not because development is easy. That's not because we're not constantly solving hard problems or, troubleshooting annoying issues. But I think it's because a lot of us don't want to have to deal with people as much. And I think we've gotten less training in how to do that side of things versus just code, right? And keep in mind too, right, again, I have a master's, the master's was heavy on, proper agile development and managing projects, blah, blah, blah. But here's what school does not teach you. School does not teach you how things work in reality. And I'm going to, again, be very real with you when it comes to communicating with your non-technical peeps, when it comes to how the project is managed, when it comes to basically anything. In my experience, the theory, the best practices don't happen. I think that they're an ideal. I think they happen sometimes. And perhaps in larger organizations that have their crap together, maybe they're occurring more frequently, but particularly in a startup, it's the Wild West out there to even, work as a developer, let alone, implement these things the best way possible. So if you're currently experiencing this, I empathize with you. I know how frustrating it is. I know how stressful it can be, especially if you're earlier in your career. I've been in the tech industry over 6 years now, but I also am newish to the development side of things, right? I only have so much industry experience doing actual production software development. So I still struggle with these things as well, which is why I wanted to make this video. It's getting cold in here. So here are my tips for you if you're currently experiencing this or you're about to enter the job market, again, from the startup perspective, okay? And that matters. Things happen very differently in a startup versus in a larger enterprise. My first tip for you, and this is maybe a little bit obvious, but I think it's probably the most important one, is to try your best to not get frustrated. It is very easy to get frustrated as an engineer. People ask unreasonable things of you. They don't understand what you're doing. Sometimes they don't respect your work or they want things instantly. And you're also solving really hard problems, right? You can be mentally tired. You can be sitting at a desk all the time. And one thing leads to another and something snaps and you're getting extremely frustrated, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't care or that you shouldn't be advocating for yourself or being assertive about what needs to happen with the project. What I'm saying is that if you can manage your frustration, you're going to be better off, because unfortunately we are required to maintain certain relationships and we need to maintain the vibe of the project and the positive nature of the relationship. We need ways to cope with our frustration and our stress around all these unknowns, all these things that are thrown at us, all these things that are unreasonable. And one of the ways we can be reassured that we don't need to get extremely frustrated is by having faith, having confidence in our ability to be assertive and properly explain what's going on and consequences of certain actions, which we'll talk about in all of the next tips. But for tip number 1, when it comes to managing the frustration, like I said, unless you're real laid back, which bravo, I'm happy for you, I'm not. Unless you're real laid back, when something frustrates you, leave the desk. Leave the desk. If you're in the middle of a meeting that's frustrating you, right? I know that's a little harder to, keep things under wraps in the moment, but I think it's, let me think on this, let me buy some time to kind of let things settle in and think of a intelligent, non-aggressive way to communicate your thoughts. This isn't ideal. It's sometimes the frustration is still going to come out, but yeah, a lot of times it involves getting away from that desk, right? You've just been asked for something unreasonable, or something's not turning out the way it should be, whatever. You need to get some fresh air, get some perspective, get away from the code. And then when you return from your desk and you have some fresh air in your lungs and you've exercised a little, got the blood pumping, I think it's useful to set aside time each day to processing your thoughts. So getting all of your thoughts and feelings about what's going on onto paper or onto your word processor or whatever. And when you do that, inevitably, it's not going to sound as good as it could. Maybe you sound extremely pissed off. Maybe you're using way too many words to explain what's going on. Maybe you are getting way too technically detailed in your response that you want to give these people. Maybe you're not giving enough technical detail. So get your thoughts onto paper and then really try to come up with something that is concise, factual, and goes beyond you being frustrated, right? Because that's only going to create negativity in your relationships. But being able to say honestly, hey, if we do this means that this thing will no longer be able to be prioritized based on how much time we have allotted. Hey, this has not been thoroughly tested, so a potential consequence is going to be this. If this happens, blah, 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 blah. You take your feelings out of it, you present the facts, and if you're watching this and you have more tips for dealing with frustration, leave those in the comments. And I kind of already went into tip number two a little bit. What you want to do is to be able to practice saying what is currently happening, what is being asked of you, and what the consequence will be of doing whatever was asked next. But there's a couple more things I would recommend you do besides just learn to communicate assertively when it comes to being assertive in this situation. The first is that I would practice saying what you need to say. Again, when you start thinking about this thing that is really, really frustrating to you and seems like obvious, or why are you putting us through this, or this makes zero sense, it can be easy to get mad all over again. Practice being able to say it without being so affected and attached to it. You are just stating the facts, you are the messenger, and you're going to enforce and stand by whatever you say the consequence is going to be of this ask. And if you're new to improving your communication skills, I would even recommend finding someone in your life that you think has really stellar communication skills, seems to communicate really well with people, and run your practice round of saying this by them and ask them, am I clearly stating the problem and why it's a problem? Am I clearly providing a solution, taking the frustration and negativity out of it? Am I being aggressive with this? So I personally like to have things also in writing. I mean, it depends on what it is, what the situation is. You don't have to document every single thing and, CC people necessarily. It depends. It also depends on, hey, did you bring this up verbally the first time and they realized that something needed to change and it got changed? Or did you communicate this to them and it seemed they didn't get it or take it seriously? And so you need to put in writing what you communicated to cover your butt. This is going to look different depending on how your team operates. Again, in startup world, it's the Wild West, but it needs to be written in some in some kind of message. I prefer it to be in a Google Doc where plans are being made. If you're using GitHub or GitLab issues, obviously updating those and your thoughts on that and what's possible. But sometimes if your team's really informal, you're moving fast, you're moving with people who aren't super technical, this might just be a Slack message or a text message. But again, it's written, you've got the record, you're covering yourself. And tip number 3, I've only got 3 tips. Those of you who feel like you're veterans at this, please add some advice down here to the bottom, because this is just from my lived experience and my progress so far. My final tip for you is to not be surprised when crap goes sideways anyway, because all of us who have worked in industry have had that experience of being asked for something unreasonable, whether it's an unreasonable technical ask, an unreasonable time frame, whatever, and even going through the steps of verbally and writtenly, and maybe multiple times communicating, hey, this is why this is not feasible. And there are going to be times, for me, it's probably happened a solid 50% of the time. like a coin flip. But a good portion of the time, you are still not going to be listened to, at least not fully. Why? Because people don't fully understand what it is you do and the expertise you bring. Maybe it's because they are blinded by their vision of things and the promises they've already made to people. Maybe they think that they're listening to you and they're providing you what they need, but again, because they do not know as much as that maybe they should or could about this process, they're just not giving you everything you need. Perhaps you run into issues later on in the project when they realize that they didn't ask for certain things that they really actually wanted. The list goes on and on for reasons why this can happen, but the fact is, it will happen at times. So what does that mean for you? First, I wouldn't take it personally. You're gonna get blamed. It might just be a little bit of blame, it might be a lot of blame, but you're probably gonna get some form of blame or ask like, what the heck, what's happening? Why is this thing broken? Why is it not happening fast enough? Whatever. Even if it's your first developer job, if you have tried to communicate assertively throughout the process, how things are going, what you think is gonna happen if we try to do this, blah, 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 you've done your part, right? So don't take it personally. And if you've been covering your butt, especially in written format when it comes to sharing the consequences of whatever's being asked, then that means you've also covered your butt for anything potentially negative that would happen. Now, none of this has ever happened to me, but you're working with random people, startups, people who don't always know what they're doing. Some people are more professional than others. So let's say like they want to threaten to not pay you full payment. Well, if you agreed upon certain requirements and you met those requirements as stated where it was documented, and you've also documented why something was going to be a problem, and then it turns out to be a problem, you're owed the money. I think you also have it within your right to let them know what it will take to fix it. And it's really a matter of what your team looks like. That will depend on, hey, will they be somewhat collaborative about this? Will it be fixed somewhat quickly, even though it never should have happened? Or are they going to like really turn this into a thing and make this as difficult as possible and completely blame you? Just like tip number 1, when it comes to expressing your frustration about something that's happening, when the thing does happen, like you said it would, I feel like it's best to try to not be extremely frustrated or to cope or manage that frustration again, regardless of how they're behaving, and to keep it professional, keep it factual, remind them, hey, I know, I'm sorry this is happening, but we did talk about that this would happen if we did this. This is what I propose be done now. This is what is possible to fix it or to remediate the situation, whatever. And you also have the choice to walk away from developer environments that just don't suit you or do not handle these types of situations well. Things go sideways with software projects all the time, and you really want to be a part of a team that can handle it in at least a semi-healthy and positive way. It's harder to find than you might think. And here's a few simpler examples of what it means to be passive or aggressive, right? Let's say that you are asked to do something in 4 days. Maybe it's implementing a new feature or, finishing an issue, fixing a bug, whatever. You know that this thing is unreasonable to do in 4 days. Passive communication would be, I'll try my best. You might think that you're insinuating by saying that it might not be possible, but that is too passive for a work environment, in my opinion. And also, not everybody is great at communicating and picking up on what you're trying to say. Another passive example might be just saying, okay, if it's not okay, you gotta say something about it not being okay. Or if so-and-so thinks it can get done, then I'll get it done. Again, it does not matter what so-and-so, anybody, whether they're technical or not, says. You're the one doing it, so share your honest thoughts. Aggressive would be responding to this request by saying, like, there's no way we can do this, just period. That might not sound aggressive, it is the truth, probably, in this scenario, but it is highly negative, and unfortunately, even though it is the truth, you do have to care about being extremely negative in engineering. So again, instead of just saying, there's no way this can be done, go through and explain what is going to probably get in the way of it getting done, and when you estimate you could get it done. Or maybe propose an alternative that can be done by that date. Another aggressive thing might be, saying like, this is gonna be so much work, you have no idea how much work this is gonna be. Okay, again, even though that might be true, it really gives no information to the person that is trying to get you to do this thing. You need to outline, instead of saying you have no idea what you're talking about, this is so much work, just clearly state some of the work that's going to go into it and conclude that it cannot be done in 4 days, but again, and with what can happen. I hope those help, because I've, again, learned them from personal experience from my own poor communication, but obviously there are people who are like wizards at communicating these things. Anywho, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments, and keep your blood pressure down. Later, guys.